In today's show, we're looking at the Charlotte Hornets, reviewing their 1920 season, bit of an off-season preview, just talking about the players on their team and answering your questions. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today, as I said, we're looking at the Charlotte Hornets, talking about all the guys on their team, what it meant, what happened last season, what's going to happen maybe in the future, what's their off-season perhaps looking like as well. And I'm going to start like I've been starting all of these shows, by answering your questions, which came through via Instagram, which I'm chucking up on the stories, and also via Twitter. The next show I'm going to be doing is the Chicago Bulls, but that won't be until Monday next week. But keep an eye out for those stories and tweets so that you can ask your questions about that team. Now, the first question, there's a lot of questions that do double up here because people have the same sort of thoughts, of course. Lots of questions about the draft, and John Sense 91 says, what's their biggest need going into the draft? Well, good players, really, is their biggest need. So in my mock draft, my latest mock draft that I did, that was the post-lottery one, I had them taking Killian Hayes at number 3. I think there's almost no chance that that's what they end up doing. I think that they'll go with Blunty. James Wiseman there at number 3. That's not what I think they should do. Look, they just need players, really. They've got players who go, oh yeah, they're all right. Yeah, maybe they'll be good. But is there anyone who's actually good? And I'm not saying that Killian Hayes is necessarily actually going to be good. You hope he is. But they just need good players. So I'd take the best player available, and to me, at number 3, that's probably going to be Killian Hayes. Although, when I do my next mock, I might even have Hayes up at number 2, to be honest. So let's see how that all works out. Snapshot says, what's the chances they get a center in the draft versus free agency? I think they will take a center in the draft. As I said, I think they will take Wiseman there. I think they probably shouldn't, but they are one of the few teams that have cap space left. So Montrezl Harrell, to me, is someone that they probably will be targeting with that space. Harrell's probably lost himself a bit of money. I'm not sure the Clippers will want to, or not that they will want to. He might find that his suitors are down and the Clippers may not want to pay him as much as he wants, and the Hornets are the team that's offering up that money. So I could see him going there in free agency. What other questions? Will the Hornets ever be good? T. Channer's a little bit of shade there. Maybe not a little bit, a lot of shade. Will they ever be good? I'm going to say the odds would suggest yes. When that is, I have absolutely no idea. But at some point, yes, they will be good. What do they do with Rozier and Graham moving forward? It's a really good question. I just don't believe that is a winning backcourt. I think Graham was a massive, I know that Graham was a massive surprise this season to a lot of people. I thought he was going to be better than Rozier this season. I didn't think he was going to get the opportunity to be better than Rozier, but he did, and he was comfortably better. I would be looking to move on from Rozier if at all possible, or at least minimizing his role. And that's why I have no problem with them taking Killian Hayes. Put Hayes and Graham together. Let's work that out. I think Graham's value probably is as a very low-end starter, or maybe as a sixth man type. I don't really think you want to rely upon. Let's try again. I think probably his best role is sitting as a Spencer Dinwiddie type of a player on a strong playoff team. That's probably what Graham's upside ceiling is. Rozier, he's just not good. And yes, he put up some numbers, but that is literally the case because he had to put up numbers because who else was in that role? And I think he was better at times than I thought this year, but overall he still wasn't very good. Daddy Mackay says, would Charlotte take LaMelo Ball with pick 3 and run a 3-guard lineup with Rozier and Graham? I already said that I think that Ball will be off the board then. If Ball is there, they absolutely take him. Don't worry about a 3-guard lineup. In the end, Ball or Hayes, whoever they take there, or whoever they should take there, is the guy that's going to get that opportunity at some point in the future. 3-guard lineup with those 3. Look, Melo maybe, because he's 6'7". He doesn't guard very well, but maybe you put him at the 3. But just overall, you run a 3-guard lineup in terms of, at times, the way that the Oklahoma City Thunder did with Schroeder, Gilgeous-Alexander, and Paul. You don't necessarily start them together. Hopefully, you limit Rozier's minutes, but I've got no problem with Ball there. What is Devonte Graham an actual talent? This is from Dave Rumps. Shout out to you, Dave. Is Graham an actual talent, or is he Lou Williams with a greener light? I think he's a better defender than Lou Williams. He's a better passer than Lou Williams. He's nowhere near as good of a scorer as Lou Williams. I think that much like when we talked about in yesterday's show, Eric Paschal as being maybe a little bit inflated in value, I think Graham's at that level as well, where he might have another 1 or 2 strong seasons, but I don't see his long-term longevity, which is no point me saying long-term and longevity together. I just don't see him as that long-term star, real high upside type player. And that's a question that comes in from nickname 808 as well. Have we already seen Devonte Graham's ceiling? Like he can take another step. I think he can take another step in terms of his efficiency numbers because they were rough after the start of the season. But yeah, in the end, when the team does eventually start to get better, his usage is going to drop and he's just not going to have that level of volume and that level of opportunity. Here's a good question from A. Correa. Without any decent signings, will their number one fantasy player be their draft pick? I think if it is Wiseman, I would say there's a massive chance of that because I think Wiseman, if he comes out, plays 28 minutes, he'll put up some good fantasy numbers, like Hassan Whiteside style, good numbers, bad impact player. If it's LaMelo, I'm not so sure about that. If it's Hayes, perhaps, but because they do have Graham and Rozier there, those minutes might be a little bit capped early on, so I think it really depends who they pick, but there's a massive chance, if it is Blunty, in fact, that Wiseman will be the best fantasy player on this team. I think that's a legitimate possibility. All right. Let's go now on to some of the questions that come through from Twitter. And the first one is going to come from Doug Branson, the host of the Locked On Hornets podcast. He says that Locked On Hornets believes that PJ Washington deserved better than 9th place in all rookie voting. What do you say? Well, Doug, I did do an all-rookie team show the other day, and I had PJ on my first team. So yes, I believe that he was stiffed quite a bit to be put into 9th. I would have had him in that 5th spot that was taken up by Eric Paschal. Daniel says, I like Graham. I'm okay with Rozier. Well, that is your first mistake. But does PJ Washington or Miles Bridges take a big step with those two dominating the ball? I think they should trade Rozier. Yes, no worries. They should trade Rozier. Those two dominating the ball. I don't think that Bridges or Washington need really high usage to be effective. Washington had an 18 usage this year. Bridges had a 20% usage. Look, maybe they go to 21, 22 each. They're never going to be 26, 27 usage players. I still think they can be successful. Much of what their problem was this year was efficiency numbers. That was the real issue with both of those guys. I think they've got room to develop their passing as well and their defensive stats, but it's not really a usage concern to me. Kane Pittman, my co-host over at Locked On AFL and the host of Locked On Bucks. Lots of Locked On content here. How much Hornets gear did you buy in the late 90s? Well, Kane, you're wrong, because it was the early 90s that the Hornets were big, and I didn't buy any, because I was a Bulls fan, my brother was a Hornets fan, so you can pile on him for his love of the Hornets. What's your thoughts on Bridges and Washington playing the 4 and the 5 in the near future for this team? Bridges turned his production around some this year by playing at power forward. Now, Daz, this is Darren Wilson. Yeah, I do agree with you that Bridges, I think, is better as a 4 and Washington's better as a 5. I worry that they are going to take a center and that's going to force those guys to play the 4 and the 3, which is not at their best spot. So much of this to me comes down to what they do in the draft. You don't need a 7'2" center to be successful. The amount of arguments yesterday, Bam Adebayo was robbed. He should have been on the all NBA team. This guy's 6'9" at best, Bam. He's not big at all, but he protects the rim. PJ Washington has got some Bam vibes. He's not Bam, and he's a long way away from being Bam. But I don't think you need this big 7-foot type center, 7'2" type center, because you can have those guys who are shit at things like, blocking shots or rim defense or switching onto the perimeter. It's all really dependent on the player. So if I was them, I would be putting Bridges and Washington in my 4-5 and just seeing what the hell happens. Now, getting a good 3 is a tough thing in the NBA, and they don't really have another replacement at this point. But that is what I'd be doing, and that is something to watch, because I think if they do draft a big man, if they do draft Wiseman there, that does have some concerns for me as to what Bridges and Washington will do next season for sure. Michael Edmonds, I traded PJ Washington for DeMar DeRozan in a dynasty league. Did I win or lose my trade? I'm going to say lose, but it's all context dependent, because if you're looking to win last season, then getting DeRozan, or even this season, DeRozan's going to be the winner. But in 3 years' time, Washington will be the best player out of that deal without any hesitation. DeMar's already 31, 32, I think, at this point. So I have no hesitation in saying that, in 3 years' time, you've lost it, but for the short term, then you probably win it. James says, Can Jaylen Mcdaniels carve out some consistent bench minutes and production next season? I think McDaniels came on pretty strong at the end of the season. He had some impressive moments. Some of his advanced stats were good. Interestingly, he is 22 years of age already, close to 23. So he's not the youngest guy as a second round pick, but I think he did step up to at least become somewhat of a rotation player. I know the Hornets people really, really like McDaniels and think that maybe he could develop even into a starter at some point. I'm not sure I'm quite across him at that level, but I think he can get some consistent bench minutes next year. Yes, Chris Larson says, is Malik Monk officially a bust? Do you see any upside improvements still being made? He's been shithouse. There's no doubt about that. There are plenty of people who thought he should be a top 2, top 3 pick in that draft. He obviously wasn't. There are plenty of off-court problems there. Not only the marijuana suspension, but just the fact that he seems to be a complete dickhole. And coaches have punished him accordingly. And that's why his role hasn't been there. His discipline is off. His defensive stuff is an absolute liability. And that is the real problem with Monk. He's heading into his 4th season and he has to turn it around because he has had opportunities absolutely turkey slap him right across the face and he just pisses him down the drain. And that is a sign of immaturity. He's the same age as Jaylen McDaniels and he's played 3 years in the NBA. He's only 22. So there is still marginal hope for Monk, but it's running out pretty bloody quickly at this point. All right, last question before we get into the actual talk here. Actually, one more question. Yeah, Matty Lawson, who on Twitter is at NBA Dynasty ADP. Go follow Matt over there because he's been collating Dynasty ADP data, which I think is really interesting. He says Devonte Graham has a Dynasty ADP inside the top 60 in recent startups drafts, highest by far on the Hornets. Is he a sell in Dynasty, or should we expect top 50-ish seasons for Graham in the future? It's a great question because Devonte Graham was the 57th ranked player this season. He played 35 minutes. He had a 24% usage. He shot horribly, but you're drafting him at the value he had last season, where I think maybe you can get one more season or maybe 2 seasons of him at that level. I just don't have the faith in Graham, who's going to turn 26 next season, to be this long-term top 50 player in a situation where he's probably not going to have it as good as he had it this year. Massive kudos to him. I think he's actually a pretty good player, but I'm not sure that taking him at 60 in a startup draft is probably the best use of your assets there, when again he's already 26. He's going to be 26 by the time next season starts, and I'm not sure I want to bank on him as a long-term starter. Yes, long-term starter. All right, it's time for me to tell you about Built Bar. I just completely frozen what I was going to say there. But Built Bar, you're never going to freeze if you're eating one of them because they taste scrumptious. Maybe you'll lose your train of thought because it is just so delicious. Built Bar is back with 6 new flavors to go along with their original 12 flavors. Lemon almond cheesecake, carrot cake, lots of cake flavors, cookies and cream, caramel brownie. You know why they've got these great flavors? Because these bars taste just like a candy bar. They are covered in 100% chocolate and they are soft and easy to chew. They are great for health-conscious people who are looking to lose weight or maintain weight and still looking to indulge in a tasty treat. These are high-protein, high-fiber, low-sugar, and low-calorie bars. What the hell else could you ask for in a protein bar? The coconut almond bar, 18 grams of protein. Wow, that is a lot. 180 calories only and just 5 grams of sugar. Fantastic. What a great nutritional profile. Same with cherry bars here. 17 grams of protein, but only 130 calories. That is ridiculous. 4 grams of sugar. And the best of all, the best part of this, go to BuiltBar.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON and you'll get $10 off your next order. That is the promo code LOCKEDON for $10 off your next order at BuiltBar.com. All right, let's now talk about these Hornets players. And we'll start with Devonte Graham. I already said that he's the 57th ranked player. He had a positive PIPM and a positive wrapped up. Not massive ones, but but they were positives, and that's not what you could say for every player on this team. In fact, I believe Devonte Graham had the best PIPM on this team by a fair margin. Yes, that is absolutely true. And weirdly, he didn't have the highest Raptor. That went to someone by the name of Caleb Martin. So we'll see what that means. But I do think that Graham's next season is probably going to be his best year. Again, age 27, not much in terms of future there going with him. He still, to me, has the best overall long-term or short to long-term value on this squad for the next couple of years, but I don't think it lasts all that long given his current age. He was It was impressive this year. As I said, I thought that there was a massive chance he'd be better than Rozier this season, and he comfortably was. He shot 37% from 3. The problem is he was under 40% from 2, and his true shooting was just 54%. That needs to improve. He was 38% field goals overall, one of the worst numbers in the NBA, but you punt that category, and he's like a top 35 player. I think that's part of the appeal there. You knew you were losing that category with him, so you just got the 18 points, the 3.5 triples, and almost the 8 assists. Rebounds low, steals not that great. Good free throws on okay volume, not great, 3.7, but okay. That's going to be key. He's improving both of those percent. Well, actually not improving his free throws, but improving his volume there. But he just hit and took a massive bunch of threes. I think he gets that opportunity again. I just worry again long-term about the 35 minutes and that number one role for him. I just don't think that that's a reliable thing that we rely upon. Of course, that's what reliable means. Next player we look at is his backcourt running mate, who started as the point guard and quickly shifted over to the shooting guard position because, let's be honest, he's not very good, and his contract was one of the worst contracts given out in the offseason. He still sort of lived up to my expectations in terms of where he was fantasy-wise. The 67th ranked player. He's going to be 27 next season. He averaged 34 minutes with 18 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2.7 threes with a steal, and shot 42% from the field and 41% from 3. This is a guy who's been a terrible three-point shooter from his career, so while we can pillory him for being not a good basketball player, and he's not great, is he a starter on a good team? No. Is he a rotation player? Probably. One thing that did decrease was his rebound numbers. I thought he could be a stronger rebounder than that. And I thought he could get some higher steal numbers, but he hit threes at a high volume. He scored 18 points per game, so it wasn't a complete disaster from Rozier. Unfortunately, all the advanced stats hated him. Minus 3.2 PIPM is horrendous. Minus 2.1 Raptor is bad. 55 true shooting is all right. 24 usage is okay. But those other advanced numbers really, really hate what he does. His long-term outlook with PIPM is really rough. And while I think the draft is going to come a long way into determining what his future role is on this team, I think he's maybe got 2 years left as a 30-minute-a-night player. Maybe. I wouldn't have much faith in him doing much more than that. He's quite destructive defensively, and offensively, while the numbers are there, it's one of those situations for Rozier where you look at this and you go, well, is it just an opportunity scenario where he's getting those numbers because who the hell else is going to do it? And I fear that's probably the problem with him. PJ Washington, Paul Washington Jr., the 144th ranked player this season. He only played 30 minutes a night, so there's obviously room to improve there. 12 points per game, 5 rebounds, 0.9 steals, 0.8 blocks, really poor shooting numbers, 55 true shooting. He hit 37% from 3. That was skewed by some hot shooting early on, and it did fall off, but 51% on twos is rough. 65% from the free throw line is rough. His advanced numbers weren't that great either. Negative 1.4 PIPM, only 19 usage. But there's the scope of things to improve there. The block numbers need to improve. The field goal percentage needs to improve. And the free throw percentage needs to improve. And the three-point shooting from him was a surprise, considering he's a bad free throw shooter. He was not a three-point shooter in college at all. And he changed his game. And that's great for him. 6 threes a game. And we see this with Kentucky guys all the time. Is their game just completely changes when it hits the pros. And Washington's change was he's going to attempt a lot more threes. Sorry, I said 6.2 threes. I was wrong. 4 3-point attempts per game. But hitting him at 37% is strong, and that's way higher than anything he did in college. But my skepticism on his shooting remains because of the free throw shooting and how poor that has been for him. And how this is sort of a 1 year or maybe a half a year sample size of being a 3-point shooter. I think he can be a better passer than he showed as well. I think there is some pretty decent upside in PJ Washington in terms of being a long-term starter. I'd put a degree of faith in him. The advanced projection stuff doesn't love him a huge amount, but I still see that there with him. I reckon he can have probably 4 or 5 top 75 seasons coming up. I think that his best years are probably 3 or 4 years away still. So we're still, maybe he doesn't even finish as a top 100 guy this year, and the draft is going to really impact that as to whether they play him as a 4 or a 5. He should be a 5. We'll see exactly what they do there. But him as a 5 that can shoot threes and can play pretty good defense and I think can develop his passing, there is quite a bit to see there. So just depending on what the value of him is in dynasty leagues, I'd be looking at it. He's 22 years of age, so he's not completely old, but he's not super young. But there is still a bit of value in him, and I think that he can probably knock on the door close to the top 100 for next season. A guy that was really a disappointment this year, Miles Bridges, the 150th ranked fantasy player. I thought he could be a top 80, top 75 guy, and he obviously shit the bed there. Because my thought going into this was, okay, Terry Rozier is going to take a lot of shots. Who else is going to take shots on this team? It's not going to be Nick Batum. It's probably not going to be Cody Zeller or PJ Washington. And I wasn't factoring in 35 minutes and your 15 shot attempts from Devonte Graham. Bridges did improve in some areas this year. He averaged 13 points, but he played only 31 minutes, which is a real disappointment. 13, 5.5 and 2. 0.8 blocks, 0.6 steals, 1.5 threes. 81% from the line is big. That's improvement. 75 he was at last season, but he lost his overall shooting numbers did dip, and that's because his 2-pointers went from 55 down to 49%. 3-pointers still at 33, some room for improvement there. He showed a little bit of extra in terms of passing, but not much. His rebounding numbers dropped as well, mainly because he was playing more small forward than power forward, which is where he was at last year. But overall, it was an improvement from his rookie season outside of efficiency numbers. So I do think that he has room for improvement here. He's a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none guy who could easily be a 1-1 guy, but be a 1-3 exactly, 1 steal exactly, 1 block guy, not like 2.5 threes, 1.5 steals, 1.4 blocks. I don't think he's that sort of guy. And he just wasn't able to handle the increased usage. His usage did go up from 15 to 20. It's a big jump, but it didn't really work in his favor. I still think they should be persisting with him, but I wouldn't be surprised if in a year's time they say, well, I'm not really sure you're part of the future here. Negative 2.85 PIPM is terrible. Negative 3.1 Raptor is pretty poor as well. He's still probably 3 years away from his absolute peak. I'm not sure how good that peak is. I don't think he can ever be a top 40 fantasy guy. I reckon he can be maybe a top 75 player, but I'm out on that given... Look, I thought he could be top 75 last year, and that was assuming that he could keep up some defensive numbers and maintain some good efficiency, and he couldn't. Can he afford to play more minutes? Yes. Can he probably deal with more usage? At this point, probably not. There are some concerns about where his career goes from here. He's the same age as PJ Washington, playing 2 seasons in the NBA, so I'm not writing him off by any stretch. But he's, again, a little bit of one of those guys that I look at and go, well, what's the actual strength there? What is he coming with that's going to impress us? I think it's got to be going to 17 points per game, but we're a long way away from that at this point. Cody Zeller, 185th ranked player for the season. Negative 1.61 PIPM, negative 1.6 Raptor. This is a guy who's had in the past some quite strong advanced stat numbers. It wasn't the case this year. He averaged just 11 points in 23 minutes with 7 rebounds. Lost his starting spot at times to Bismarck Biambo. We had PJ Washington starting at center, and I think the writing here is on the wall for Zeller. Even though he is a solid enough player, that the fact that Washington should be the guy that they are focusing on ahead of him, and then there's the opportunity that they draft Wiseman. So I think things for Zeller are looking pretty down at the moment. Really would be a strong backup center in the Mason Plumlee role. He's a much better center than Mason Plumlee, but in that sort of play 18, 20 minutes a night sort of scenario. And that's exactly what I think if you do have him in a dynasty league, you should be bracing for, that Zeller moves into one of those smaller roles. The next one. This is a really interesting one to talk about, and it's Nick Batum, because he has got, amazingly, 1 year left on his contract, a $27 million player option. He will definitely be picking that up. He is 32 years of age. He played 23 minutes a night, and he scored, look, hold on to your scrotums, because he scored 3.6 points per game. That is unfathomable. He still had 4.5 rebounds and 3 assists with 0.8 steals, which are all strong numbers. He shot 35% from the field. He had a usage of 9%. 9. How is that even possible? A true shooting of 46. He just seems over the last 2 seasons that he does not give a shit about having any sort of aggressiveness on offense at all. The passing's still there. The defense is still pretty strong. Rebounding well. All those things are still true with Batum. But 29% from 3, he has just fallen off completely. And I don't expect him, despite having unbelievably a Raptor as 0.18 and a PIPM is not that bad, negative 0.65, that he will probably be finding himself out of the rotation again. He's 32 years of age. That is just an unfathomably bad season from Batum. I worried about what his role would be coming into this season. I didn't think it'd be this bad. And then he only played 22 games as well, which is absolutely unbelievable. Just a shitful season, and his career feels pretty much as good as cooked at this point. Now, if he does get bought out, I could see him going to a team, finding an 18-minute-a-night role, like what Jeff Green did, and Austin Rivers did. Someone finds himself on the Spurs and actually finds himself rejuvenated and plays really good defense. Not good fantasy numbers, but plays some actually good defense, passes the ball well, and maybe finds the ability to shoot once every more than every blue moon, which is exactly where he's sitting at the moment. So an unbelievably bad season from Nick Batum, but with some silver linings with some of that advanced stuff that he put up. Malik Monk, talking about shithouse. Malik Monk, 21 minutes a night. Now, he had this opportunity, right? With this team, Terry Rozier is our starting point guard. Who's our starting shooting guard? Is it Dwayne Bacon? Lol. We'll talk about him later on. Malik Monk, can you push into that role? Can you be the sixth man? Well, no, you can't, because you got overtaken by Devonte Graham. You got overtaken by the Martin brothers. You had another suspension, and you just seem to be an absolute dickhole at this point. Now, he averaged 10 points with 2.9 rebounds and 2.1 assists. But for a guy that was this three-point bomber, what a deadly scorer. He shot 28% on threes. He does 82% from the line. He can be a good shooter, but Jesus, he is bad. He is just absolutely horrible. He cannot defend. The passing, which I think he showed flashes of under Steve Clifford in his rookie season, playing some point guard, he's just not going to get that opportunity again. -3 PIPM, -4.5 Raptor. Usage still 23%. Just another horrible season from Malik Monk, who is definitely not getting a rookie extension, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's out of the league after this season. There are just too many negative things going on about him that I just don't know where he sits. Amazingly, he's still 22, so he's the same age as PJ Washington and Miles Bridges and Jaylen McDaniels. He's the same age as these guys, so he does still have years to mature, but at some point, Charlotte's just going to go, we don't want to deal with this guy because he's not producing on the court. He's screwing things up off the court. Well, what do we do with him? There are a lot of concerns for me with Monk. I still think that his best years are in front of him, 2-3 years down the track. So if he can get his shit figured out, then maybe they can sign him to a cheaper deal after this rookie contract, and he can be there as an interesting sixth man type player, seventh man type player who plays 18 minutes a night. Maybe he's in the mold of a Dion Waiters type of a guy who can have some moments as a scorer. He needs to work on his defense quite a bit, but so far the Malik Monk experience has been really disappointing. I'm not completely ruling him out at this point to be a solid-ish player, but man, it was rough. It was real rough for him last season. Let's talk about Caleb Martin, 274th ranked player in fantasy. He only played 18 games, 18 minutes a night, 6 points, 81% from the line, a massive Raptor, +3, -0.3 for PIPM, 60% true shooting, 15% usage. Didn't play all that much. The advanced stuff did like him for this season. I'm not that convinced that it sticks. I think his brother is a better player, but Caleb Martin did put up some okay numbers. He had his G League PIPM wasn't that good, but he did. I thought he did play some good basketball in the G League, and that's sort of what got him promoted into that rotation. I wouldn't be surprised to see Martin ahead of someone like Monk or Batum in the rotation next season. He scored 21 points a game in the G League. Unfortunately, just 65% free throws, shot 36% from three on high volume, and he was absolutely encouraging. I think the problem you have there with him is he's 25 years of age. So he's already much older as a rookie. Where is the actual growth here for Martin? I'm not sure where it lies. With 44% shooting, and he shot 54% from three in the NBA, which is largely why his advanced numbers are as good as they are. I'm not convinced that's going to stick, but I do think he can become a guy who is a rotation level player. I just don't think he's going to be necessarily a strong fantasy contributor. Jaylen Mcdaniels next, another second round pick. Well, actually not another one because Caleb Martin wasn't a second round pick. He was undrafted. Jaylen Mcdaniels, a 307th ranked player, -0.8 PIPM, +0.3 Raptor, 57 true shooting, 13% usage. We didn't really see much of him at the NBA level, 16 games, 18 minutes, but he averaged 6 and 4. He had half a steal. He hit half a three a game at 38%. The bones are there for what he can do as an NBA rotation player, I think. And that's encouraging because earlier in the year, I was a little bit worried about where this guy was going to end up and what he was going to do. But in the G League, he averaged 16 and 8 with 2 steals and a block and 39% shooting on 4 attempts per game. Like, that's really, really encouraging. I think he can work his way into a backup 4 role, a guy that maybe you switch out to center at some points with some of his defensive abilities, but really strong defensive ability. 22 years of age, grow him with Bridges and Washington and see how, and to a lesser extent Graham and whoever this pick is at number 3, you start to grow those guys together. I think there is some upside here for McDaniels, some pretty significant upside. In a couple of years' time, I'd prefer him over probably a Monk and a Caleb Martin and a Cody Martin in terms of the young guys, and definitely over a Bacon and those sort of players. Probably not as high as Bridges and Washington, but a guy that's probably available in quite a few leagues. And in terms of impact, I think he can be a rotation player, and I think he can have some sort of fantasy impact at some point. Next up is Bismarck Biambo. Just quickly on him, 311th ranked player. PIPM, negative 0.52, negative 3.1 Raptor is pretty poor. We saw him start games this year. He averaged 7 and 6 in his 19 minutes. Can't hit free throws. Still a block a game, but this guy is 28 years of age. He's an unrestricted free agent. He's never going to get that contract. Can he be a third center in the future? Probably, but I would hope that our times of seeing Bismarck Biambo start games in NBA in an NBA season are probably cooked. He can be a pretty good defender, but overall, I just think that the fantasy value obviously is not there. Cody Martin, the other of the Martin twins, he was the second round pick, 25 years of age, similar to his brother. What a surprise. 19 minutes, 5 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 43 and 65. The shooting was the real worry, but like his brother, just a massive winning impact player. Why can't I say numbers? Plus 2.5 in Raptor. And he played 50 games this year at 19 minutes a game, plus 0.31 in PIPM. And that's with a really poor true shooting of just 51%. That is really encouraging. I think that Martin probably has some limitations on his game and maybe only has a 3-4 year window as being a winning impact guy. I view him as more of an Austin Rivers type, a guy that can be a useful player, but not necessarily good on the stat sheet. But I thought he was really, really impressive this season when he was thrown into roles. He was playing over Monk, he was playing over Patoon, and absolutely deservedly so, because those guys weren't playing well. He had a pretty strong PIPM in the G League as well, so contributed to winning there. And if you look at what he did towards the end of the season, his minutes were coming up. He had a couple of double-digit scoring games. He had games where he was getting steals. He was getting assists. He had 16 assists in two games. 9 assists in one, 7 in the other. Only 3 and 2 points in those games, but really interesting performances. That one against the Nuggets, 32 minutes, 2 points, but 4 rebounds, 7 assists and 3 steals. The very next game, 3 points, but 9 assists and 2 steals. That's really interesting. Can he be a starter? Probably not. Is he a rotation guy that can be a real impact player who can occasionally chuck in some steals and assists? Yeah, that's really interesting for me for Cody Martin. I value him higher than Caleb Martin. I think that as a player, he's probably a better option than McDaniels, but as a fantasy option, I think Jaylen Mcdaniels probably has the highest ceiling there. But some really, really impressive things. And when I'm looking at my overall impact on winning stuff for this team as they currently sit, he comes in, I think, third or fourth overall in terms of total value over the next 5 years, behind Washington, Bridges, and Graham. So that's interesting. It doesn't necessarily translate into fantasy, but still really super stuff from Cody Martin. Billy Hernangomez, he's an unrestricted free agent. Look, not that great. 357th ranked player. Negative in Raptor, positive in PIPM, good true shooting. We know that this guy, when he plays, he will put up points. He will have good percentages or good field goal percentage and good rebounds. He will never block shots. He will be absolutely horrible defensively, and that is what will always keep him away from being a good fantasy player or a good NBA player. He is a much worse version of Enes Kanter, if you want a reference point for where Hernangomez sits. He's 26 years of age, unrestricted. I think he'll get an opportunity somewhere to be on a roster. I'm not convinced it will be as a rotation player, so I think we can cut bait with him pretty comfortably. Let's talk about Dwayne Bacon, who started the season as a starter and was as shithouse as you could be. He's 25 years of age. He averaged only 18 minutes a night, 6 points on a true shooting of, yes, wait for it, 42%. Negative 5.8 Raptor is abysmal. Negative 2.85 PIPM is really, really bad. I don't really see... I talked about this guy in the offseason saying, look, take a flyer on him with your last pick, but what he does is score. And if he's not scoring, he does nothing else. He can't rebound, he can't pass, he can't steal, he doesn't get blocks, he's not an efficiency player. He needs lots of opportunities to score points. And he was so bad at everything else, he didn't get those opportunities. So therefore, he was banished. And he was out of the rotation for big chunks of the season. He had 22 points in the first game of the year. All right, 22 points on 21 shots. And then he had 15 points 2 games later. He had another 25-point performance. And then it was just realized that this guy's actually a shithouse. Like, he needs to go. And that's exactly what happened. Like, that was just the end for him. His value just fell off completely. And he didn't play at all down the stretch for this team. I don't really know where he goes from here. He is a restricted free agent. I just don't think he's an impactful player, and he's just someone who needs to take a ton of shots to have any sort of impact, and that's going to make your team worse if he's taking those shots. The last guy we talk about is Joe Chile. Barely played 4 games, 8 minutes, didn't hit a shot. I don't really think there's much to talk about with Joey. -8 Raptor. Bad. One of the worst true shootings you'll ever see. 12.7%. Not a player that's got much of a future in the NBA. That'll do it, guys. That's the Charlotte Hornets done. As I said, Chicago Bulls are coming up next. So if you've got a question for that, throw it on the Instagram story. Throw it on Twitter when I do put those prompts out. Don't forget, subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on YouTube, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.